Disclaimer: this video contains shocking imagery, depictions of post-traumas, and personal life experiences that may not be suited for the younger audiences. Your discretion is advised.
I was just reading a book. All of a sudden I heard a guy screaming. I turned around and the guy sitting right next beside me was standing up.
Breaking news, firefighters taken to the hospital after responding to flames at a home on Staten Island early this morning.
The only thing that kind of kept me going was the notion that Kevin is running after me and he will follow me and things will be fine.
I'm sure we've all seen this iconic photo floating around on the internet at some point. It depicts a Marine soldier being lifted up by his comrades as he stares blankly at the camera. It's strange that such an emotionless face can tell so much of what he has experienced. This photo alone has become the representation of the 1,000-yard stare. The year 1944, World War II has been dragging on for 5 years now. The battles are at sea, on ground, and in the air, and in one such place that needed improved communication was the Pacific Ocean. A plan was conducted and commanded by Admiral Harry W. Hill, who was at this point well adjusted to fighting the Japanese army as he participated in many battle operations up to this point. The operation was officially known as Operation Catchpole and was a three-phase operation involving the evasion of the three main islands in Inuitak Atoll, which would provide an airfield and harbor to support attacks on the Mariana Islands to the northwest. Of course, as wars are, things got extremely messy extremely quickly. Progress was slow and non-stop fighting had gone on for 6 days straight, leaving 219 Marines and 94 soldiers in action, 568 Marines and 311 soldiers wounded in action, plus 39 Marines and 38 soldiers missing in action and presumed. Japanese losses were calculated to about 3,380 who were in action and 105 captured or imprisoned. Theodore James Miller. Theodore James Miller was one of the soldiers who aided in the battle. The fighting was intense, and for the 19-year-old private, he'd never experienced anything like it before, and that's the origin of the famed 1,000-yard stare photo. A shell-shocked, adrenaline-induced, war-beaten teenager who was much too young to ever have a look like this. Tragically, Theodore's life would come to an end a month later in a firefight in Admin Atoll. Theodore was a young man whose life was tragically cut short, but with the young man now gone, his legacy will forever live on, informing the masses about the horrors of war, what it could do to a person, and cementing that moment in history for all to witness. Shell-shocked, operational exhaustion, the 1,000-yard stare, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Language changes as our understanding changes. PTSD symptoms were termed shell shock in the First World War because it was thought that they were caused by concussive physical trauma due to the shells they were using in trench warfare. Of course, with time, PTSD became a psychological disorder fueled by inhumane or intense situations, resulting in the body going into an adrenaline-induced state of fight or flight mode for long periods of time.
You're actually a human being. You fight for a year and you spend a year in the bush, you literally turn into an animal. You don't even realize how much you change until you come back. I come back, I hear car noises, I hear horns, your nerves are shot. You're not sure what's going to happen, and you're scared to death of everything. You'll hear about Vietnam, so I want to make sure my back is covered. Well, I was always fearful what's behind me. So I acted kind of strange, I think, when I came home, because I was plucked out of a combat and jungle environment in a firefight and thrown on a plane and came home.
Many veterans find solace at the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, where they mingle with millions of visitors. But there are those who still aren't ready to view the 250-foot-long monument, even though they're separated by a distance of 4 decades. It took 10 years after the memorial was dedicated before Gannon could walk past the 58,000 names chiseled into the black granite wall.
The effects of PTSD can cause lasting changes in the brain, including changes in the amygdala, I swear to God, I hope I'm saying this right.
Amygdala,
Hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex. Do not laugh at the way I say amygdala. These areas of the brain are part of the neural circuit that controls adaptation to fear and stress. Studies show that part of the brain that handles fear and emotion, the amygdala, is more active in people with PTSD. Over time, PTSD changes your brain. The area that controls your memory, the hippocampus, becomes smaller. That is one reason experts recommend you seek treatment early. But during the First World War and the Second World War, many did not. This channel is no stranger to talking about the history of questionable treatments towards those with psychological disorders. PTSD war veterans faced all types of treatments such as electrotherapy, hypnosis, and narcotherapy, which use fentanyl, a type of truth serum. For the last one, they would drug up the patient to a point of leniency, causing the patient to be half aware or in a half aware state, resulting in the truths spilling out. To kind of paint a picture, imagine those videos you've seen of people who get their wisdom teeth pulled out or have some form of mouth surgery, and when they wake up, the drug is still in their system, and so they're in this half aware state, and they usually are acting extremely out of character or just ultimately being very funny or saying something very, very rude. It's because the truth is coming out because there simply is no filter. And that's what they would use to try to get PTSD patients cured, quote unquote. And yes, of course, lobotomies. Lobotomies were also used as a cure or a treatment for World War II veterans suffering from PTSD. But it was reported that the procedure would leave patients in a state where they were unable to care for themselves. Not to mention the stigma around PTSD was also very much looked down upon. Many vets opted not to seek out a doctor due to the nature of PTSD, one in which being dissociation from reality, and some people thought PTSD was also a form of weakness. A man named Evgeny Kopativ is a prime example of the negative effect this stigmatism could have. Kopativ was born December 25th, 1910 in the village of Altai. In his younger years, Kopativ worked as a teacher and had a passion for painting, and the dream for a higher artistic education came true in 1936 when he began to study at Kyiv State Art Institute in Ukraine. In 1941, Kopativ graduated and was now ready to pursue his path of art. However, his dreams were cut short on June 22nd, 1941, when Germany attacked Soviet Union. He then joined the Red Army and aided with the war effort. This regiment of the Red Army was engaged in a fierce battle trying to protect the small town of Pripyat. During this time, Kopativ had obtained a leg injury and was then taken in as a POW, which stands for prisoner of war, and was taken to one of the most notorious concentration camps, the Coral Pit. 90,000 POWs and civilians died at this concentration camp. The concentration camp took place in a decaying brick factory. On top of this, the area was known to have very, very intense storms, so people who were unable to find any shelter during the intense storms would simply die, resulting in a lot of death just by natural causes alone. Kopativ would remain a POW for 2 years until he was able to escape in 1943 and rejoin the war effort, serving various military operations throughout Ukraine, Moldova, Poland, and Germany. When the war ended, he was awarded the Hero of Soviet Union medal for his excellent military service, but was refused to be awarded the victory over Germany because his military career was quote-unquote spoiled because of being a POW. Now, why did I just spend 5 minutes talking about a war veteran who served as a POW for more than half of it? Well, before going off and joining the war effort, Kobativ would take a photo looking like this. A young, bright, determined man with courage-piercing eyes. Now, this is how he looked after 4 long years. A man who's tired. Wrinkles have formed on his forehead and his face has now thinned, and his eyes no longer burning with determination, but now replaying the nightmares he went through on a constant loop. The 1,000-yard stare. Another big reason I shared this story was to further dig into the fact that he was refused an award of serving due to him being a POW. This is not the only case where him being a POW was looked down upon. It's reported that Kobativ encountered those who thought his time at war wasn't the quote-unquote true soldier's experience and made fun or just did not take serious of the aftermath that his effects had on him. Thinking his signs of PTSD was actually a sign of weakness, and the fact that he didn't see much war because he was being a POW, he shouldn't even have PTSD, which is just plain ignorant. Some would argue that being a POW could be much more traumatizing due to the fact that you don't even know how long you'll be alive, what your fate will entail, and you're pretty much tortured mentally, physically, and spiritually at these camps. I couldn't imagine having my life halted, experiencing hell on earth, staying determined to escape, fight, and survive the remaining battles, only to come home and have someone of higher stature tell me my quote-unquote soldier experience wasn't the real one, and having those around me mocking me for having lasting effects of my efforts. Though Kobativ was a much stronger man than I, because even after the years of hardship, Kobativ was elected to his city council and was responsible for region's cultural activities. Almost 20 years later, I found a picture of Kobativ, an older man now, and looking much better than he did. However, his eyes were never quite the same. Remember when I told you Kobativ was an aspiring artist before joining the war? Well, he didn't let the war crush his dreams and made exhibits of his work, especially in places where he was once a prisoner, an escapee, and a soldier, allowing locals to recognize themselves, but also their tormentors in his pictures. The more I learned about Kobativ, the more I respected him. His story far passes his broken 1,000-yard stare. His story is that of inspiration, perseverance, and using your life experience to teach others, and most importantly, that you can cope with your PTSD and turn it into a positive. I won't sit here and act like I know what having PTSD feels like, but I do know it's a grueling personal battle, and I just want to end this segment with something inspiring. I'm thankful for all the vets that damaged their own personal health for the safety of those ignorant bunch who mock vets for their sacrifices. Thank you. Thus far, I've only talked about factual historical figures who have suffered PTSD and has cemented their story for all of history to see. But I do want to kind of detour the same kind of themes and narrative that I've been running with so far and introduce a new perspective on PTSD and the 1,000-yard stare, and that is movies or fictional stories. 2009's Brothers. The basis of I went back and forth with myself for many days about whether I would put this into the video. At first I thought it could come off as disrespectful. As I said earlier, I've only talked about realistic and factual historical figures, and I thought comparing that with something of a film would come off as a bit without tact. But upon rewatching the film, my mind was made up. So let us detour the video for just a second and jump into a film that masterfully speaks on the long-term effects of PTSD and how it could affect those closest to you. So before we can really talk about the movie as a whole, let us quickly recap what happens and the duration of the film. There are a lot of moving parts that I really want to get into, and it just wouldn't make any sense if you didn't see the movie and had no context for what was going on. The film begins showing Sam and Grace's relationship, and everyone at the table was disagreeing, but I think that's what really triggered Sam, because it hit the nail on the head for him. He was trained to kill, and he just watched his friend slowly die until he had to kill him. And so I think, yeah, and that's what genuinely broke him. Back to the scene, Isabel is fed up with how different her father is and is feeling jealousy towards Maggie because she just feels second to her. Later, we're shown Sam going to get psychiatric help as he deals with his PTSD, OCD, and anger issues. He finally tells Grace the truth and finally faces reality. He tells her he killed Joe, his subordinate. The two hug and the movie ends. This movie does so many things right. Not only is the story touching and well-paced, it also shows the brutal reality of those suffering from PTSD. Speaking solely for myself, whenever I would read up or listen to stories regarding people suffering from PTSD from their time at war, I tend to really only focus on the individual, the subject suffering, never the people around them. What the movie does great is even during his time away, every single person had their own thing going on. Time does not stop while you're gone. Tommy becoming a better person, the father acknowledging his past, relationships formed between Grace and Tommy, Isabel's jealousy growing towards her sister, his car no longer working, his house changing, his clothes now gone. Sam's spot in the home just simply felt replaced. Save me. I'd be better off dead. What's eating him alive is that it has always been in his nature to save people, but this time saving a person really only resulted in them suffering more and then being killed by the very man that once saved them. Another thing I want to harp on is at the end, Tommy asked Sam what's going on, and he answered, "I'm drowning, Tommy." I think those words literally meant he still feels like he never made it out of that lake in Afghanistan. Or another way to look at it could be the nod to their childhood when Sam saved Tommy from that lake. And so I believe that this last moment here is a way of Sam asking for help because he's drowning. It's just more in a figurative sense rather than a literal sense. Obviously, the ending was pretty much open-ended. It's meant to be, though. PTSD isn't something you can just cure. It's something you'll have to live with the rest of your life. It's a sad reality, but for many of our vets plagued with that notion, it's a reality. There's a chance that Sam will get better and become the man he once was, or simply he'll just have to find a new way of living. It's a perfect ending to a movie about PTSD because with disorders like these, they never truly go away. You just simply have to live with it. A common notion for PTSD is that you have to have seen combat or war to obtain the PTSD or have post-traumatic stress disorder. But I want to debunk that. I know that a lot of people know it, but you'll be surprised there are a lot of ignorant people out there. I won't say that I have PTSD, but everyday people can have it. And so a personal story of mine that I want to go first before I go into anyone else's story because it's so minuscule from the other things that I've researched and plan to talk about in this video. This happened sophomore year in college, right? I was at dorms. It was, I think, 9 o'clock, and I really was hungry. This dorm was off campus, so if I wanted to get food at the campus, it would have closed at 10. So I was like, well, I can just go and get Wendy's. And so at the time, I didn't have a car. I didn't have a bike. I actually had a motorcycle. And so I was like, I'm just gonna drive to Wendy's to get a Frosty and get like some fries or something, whatever. And so I'm driving there, right? And it's kind of weird. If you were in Atlanta, you could kind of picture it, but picture this. There was this one strip where it's a residential street, one way, both ways. So there's opposite traffic coming this way, but then there's only one lane going this way, yes? And so I'm driving, And the car in front of me is going extremely slow, right? I'm like looking at my thermometer or whatever, the speedometer, and I'm like, I'm only going 5 miles an hour. What the fuck is going on? And so I'm like trying to go around him, getting a little impatient, you know? And so it all happened so fast, but I look up and I see the car that's going 5 miles an hour. I see a hand just slowly go out, had a gun in hand, pow. And you know, normally with my helmet, things are extremely muffled, and it still spooked me. I could still hear the ringing. That's how loud it was. Pow! I was confused. I also have a tinted helmet, so looking at it, I was like, what was that flash of light just now? 3 more shots. Pow, 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 pow! I hear it. I feel it. I understand it. My heart drops, and my body does whatever it does. So, car around me swerves around me, tries to go on the opposite side just to like get out of harm's way. Like I said, it's a residential spot. I drive into someone's driveway. I drop the bike and I just run into the bushes, try to figure out what the hell's gonna happen. I hear the car goes away. I'm like, I'm gonna stay here for a couple extra seconds. And then I realized, well, what if they think I'm the one who was shooting them and I'm just crouching in their fucking private property? So I get up. Luckily nobody's there, but I do hear crying and I hear wailing in the houses. I really wanted to go in there just to see what was happening to make sure, but I think some things are better left unseen. I hear people calling the cops. I hope to this day that they're good, that they're alive, that they're fine. I have no way of knowing. But as I go back to my bike that's in the driveway, I'm like walking it awkwardly to try to like just get it back into the street, and I'm working on autopilot at this point. And this dude comes up and he's like, yo, Blood, what happened? I said, what do you mean? He said, was they just busting shots? I said, yeah, they sped off. They said, fuck. And they sped off too. What the hell? What are they doing? So I'm sitting here like, that was weird. And you know what I do next? I go to the Wendy's. I go to the Wendy's, drive there like nothing ever happened. And I get there, and guess what? The whole time, their Frosty machine closes at 10. I'm like, are you serious? I wanted to tell the people, I just went through a shootout to get here. And I can't even get the fucking Frosty. Well, I left with the lemonade and fries, okay? So I go home, and I eat the lemonade and fries, and I tell my friends this. I was like, yeah, guys, I was in a shootout. And they were just like, what? And they were all, so worried about me. Rightfully so, right? And so I'm thinking in the time, like, they're overreacting. I'm okay. I don't even understand what they're talking about. And then sometime later, that adrenaline, my body started shaking. We were all watching a movie, or I think we were watching Gossip Girl, and I just zoned out. I started thinking like the what if possibilities. What if one of those strays hit me? What if they were after me? What if I died there? I could have died there. My hands started shaking. My mind started racing. Couldn't even focus on Gossip Girl anymore. It just hit me like a wave. And I kind of wanted to cry, but I couldn't cry. It was weird. It was a weird feeling that I'd never felt before. And the reason why I wanted to share this story was to share my own personal experience about what extreme trauma can do to a person. I didn't even get shot. I didn't even face life or death as much as what you're going to hear about very soon. However, PTSD can be found in anyone. September 10th, 2020. On top of the newly formed pandemic, the world was also on fire. Everyone is aware of the 2020 California wildfires, which set records in California history. But there was another wildfire in the western Washington that spawned this devastating picture. This photo was posted onto Facebook by Ike Colston. The caption stating, "Fire whooped my ass." Within the photo, a man can be seen covered head to toe in soup, having bloodshot red eyes while looking completely exhausted, and the caption coming off as a form of a joke, but with one glance at the photo, you can tell this man has been through something life-endangering. On September 7th, the fire began out of a freak accident. Storms brought up the winds up to 50 miles per hour, while a power line had fallen and was emitting sparks, causing the wind to feed the flames and carry them for 330,000 acres of land. Costa would be one of the many firefighters to risk their lives that day, trying to save those surrounded by flames and help stop the fire. Colston had been a firefighter for 20 years at this point, and when being interviewed, he'd have this to say.
I went down to the driveway, looked behind there, and they, finally got there, and it was like seeing what was coming, and it was a big old wall of flames, and I had hardly any time to react. Those conditions that you're put in, maybe once every 2 or 3 years, you're put in that type of position. You don't come across those moments when I might die. It was just really chaotic situation, trying to deal with the fire, keep everybody safe, help out the homeowners. I didn't realize, how hurt I was or how beat up I was or how tired I was at that moment. I was just really amped.
Colston would go in to repeat this process to hit a house, try and save as many people as possible, then go on to the next, all the while trying to contain the flames from spreading any further. He would do this for another 19 days total, until finally a downpour would happen, finally bringing the flames to an end and giving Colston his long-awaited break. Yoshi Ginsberg. As I stated, PTSD can't only be found in vets who witnessed inhumane treatment of human lives, but can also be found in anyone who has ever faced life-altering experiences. A movie by the name Jungle is actually based off a book named Lost in the Jungle, a harrowing true story, which are retellings of an adventurer who got lost in the Amazon jungle for 3 weeks without food or supplies, spawning this horrifying image. As a young man, Yoshi Ginsberg dreamed of exploring the uninhabited heart of the Amazon jungle. Yoshi was moved by Henry Charvier's book, Babylon, and wanted to follow in his footsteps, and so he would travel to South Africa to explore the jungles. He would meet Marcus Stam, a teacher from Switzerland, and Kevin Gale, an American photographer. While the three men were traveling through La Paz, Bolivia, Yoshi met Karl Rupschter, an Austrian who claimed to be a geologist. He tells them he's planning on traveling into the Amazon in search of gold, and so the 3 travelers would tag along with him. The 4 men would first travel to Ashurama's river, delving into the uncharted areas of the Amazon. Not long into their travels, supplies would become low, and Marcus develops trench foot, which is when the foot is in an unsanitary, damp environment for a very long time. Things became dire, and the group decided they would shoot and eat monkeys. Not Marcus though, which only aided in his deterioration. Eventually the 4 men separated. Marcus and Carl headed back to civilization on foot, while Yoshi and Kevin decided to build a raft. Not long, the river's current proved to be too much, knocking and separating the 2 as they fought to keep their heads above the water. Later, Yoshi would wash up ashore and spend his first 5 days within the jungle, going in circles as he tried to make it out of the naturally filled maze. Kevin would be found 5 days later by local fishermen. He would go to the locals and advocate for the search parties because he just knows his friend is still out there alive. This is where the movie would diverge a bit because sometimes facts are stranger than fiction, and most of the things that happened to Yoshi simply could not be shown in film format without coming across as some form of torture porn. It would be 2 more weeks until they actually found Yoshi. During this time in the jungle, he faced death multiple times. On one occasion, Yoshi came face to face with a jaguar in the middle of the night. He managed to fight off the big cat with a lighter and some mosquito repellent. There was a flooding incident in the jungle, which almost drowned Yoshi. Afterwards, he sank into a bog. twice. Within the movie, they have this very intense scene of Yoshi removing a parasite from his head. In the real story, what if I told you there wasn't just one worm, but 18 worms that he had to remove from his head that night? Towards the end of the journey, Yoshi would begin to hallucinate a young woman. He'd make shelter and a place for her to sleep and everything. The next day, the young woman would be gone, and Yoshi understood that it was all in his head. Despite this mindset, he kept moving forward. Having only been living on berries and animal eggs, he was extremely weak. Furthering his injuries, his foot had been decaying from a fungi infection. His will was so very strong that it's been reported that he stated, "I actually went and shook a tree and showered myself with them because my feet couldn't carry me anymore and I needed to stand." He said, "I showered myself with fire ants, and on the waves of pain, I managed to get up and keep going." Quite literally on the verge of death, Kevin would finally find Yoshi and bring him back to safety. His injuries were dire and locals believed that he'd have no chance of survival. However, after 3 long months, Yoshi would make a full recovery. Regarding his 2 other comrades, Carl and Marcus, they would go missing in the jungle. It's also been recorded that Carl, the Austrian geologist, was never a geologist to begin with, and there was never any gold. He was a criminal, likely looking for a way to escape the country. Yoshi's story is one filled with perseverance and miracles. Yoshi was able to come out of it alive and share his story, but when facing such a reality, you'd think it would eat away at your psyche for the rest of your life.
The first 2-3 days, all I did was walking on the cliffs, screaming and shouting and looking for Kevin. On the 4th day, I realized I will not find him. And I had to face it, that I'm alone. I had nothing, no gun, no knife, no fire, no food, and no knowledge of this environment. The beasts are out there around, and the fear, the consuming fear, the famine. I haven't eaten, in those 4 days, I haven't eaten anything. But the worst thing is the loss of hope, like after 4 days, I've realized I will not see Kevin anymore. And that brought to a total breakdown, and where I thought I will die alone, miserable, and that I'm a victim of the worst possible circumstances. My lifelong dream has turned into the worst nightmare. That's how I felt.
However, no matter how much I researched, I could never find anything of him publicly stating his mental health. But then I found this. He was interviewed by Grin and was asked this question: "What has been the biggest challenge in your life?" He would reply, "Challenges in life, they never stop. I guess the most dramatic one is the jungle adventure, though in my personal life there are even greater challenges, not as exotic, I'm afraid." He would go on to list his divorces, his child's debirth, the effects of 9/11, his financial situation. He would continue, "I can go on and elaborate, but in essence there is suffering, the first noble truth, and adversity finds us all, and challenges never cease to challenge. I had to start my career by walking my talk. Never be a victim, always be responsible and persevere. How can I teach it to others if I am not the messenger, but the message itself?" I'm sure behind closed doors, he may suffer and may remember the harrowing experiences he had in that jungle. He isn't a victim, but a walking and talking human being with many stories to tell younger people that could end up making the same mistakes as him. The message behind his story is definitely a motivational one, but that doesn't take away from the horror of the look in his eyes soon after his rescue.
I was just reading a book. All of a sudden I heard a guy screaming. I turned around and the guy sitting right next beside me was standing up and stabbing another guy with a Rambo knife.
A video published on YouTube August 1st, 2008 called "Bus Beheading Eyewitnesses" depicts a man describing a murder scene that he had just witnessed. This video popped up in my recommendation about 2 months ago and was the sole reason for me making this video in the first place. His mannerisms, the way he nonchalantly tells his story, the look in his eyes, they're haunting. July 30th, 2008, a Greyhound bus was headed to Winnipeg, Manitoba. It wasn't long before the quiet trip became a horror scene. McLean, a 22-year-old carnival worker, was on his way home from work on July 30th, 2008. He boarded a Greyhound bus 1170 around 12:01 p.m. He was exhausted due to a long shift and just got off and seated himself towards the back, closest to the window, and braced himself for a 22-hour-long ride. Tim McLean was only ever described as a happy, charismatic individual who found enjoyment with talking and getting to know strangers. His personality was infectious, and no one had a bad thing to say about him.
Tell us about your son, Timothy.
Timothy was for sure by far my wild child. He was a free spirit. He was incredibly bright, very intelligent, had read everything in the school library by grade 5, bored, unchallenged in school, dropped out of high school, wanted to travel with the fair to meet interesting people and see the world, or see the country anyway, and he loved doing that. He was the kind of kid that could throw himself into any group and get along with everybody. He was also the peacemaker, so if there were a couple of people that weren't getting along so well or arguing or whatever, he would smooth things over. People would wait on him. If they wanted to hang out with him and he wasn't ready, they would wait till he was ready.
So when the man boarded at 6:55 p.m. in Ackerson, Manitoba, the 40-year-old Chinese immigrant Vince Lee would meet eye to eye with McLean, as he would give a gentle smile and offer his seat to Lee. He would go to lean on the window and drift back to sleep. Passengers say up until this point, Lee was acting completely normal until low muttering could be heard as Lee silently recited Chinese chants. He then grabbed a large Bowie knife, one he always carried around with him, and began stabbing him in his sleep. Lee was enraged and began swiping at those who tried to stop him, so they too exited the bus. At this point, McLean was likely dead from all the stab wounds. From outside, the passengers could see Lee decapitating him, then beginning to cannibalize him.
The guy still kept stabbing him. Everybody got off the bus. Me and a trucker that had stopped and the Greyhound driver ran up to the door to maybe see if the guy was still alive or we could help or something like that. And when we all got up, we seen that the guy was cutting off the guy's head. He was cutting off the guy's head there, and he saw us. He came back to the front of the bus, told the driver to shut the door. He pressed the button and the door shut, but it didn't shut in time, and the guy was able to get his knife out and take a swipe at us, so we backed off the door, and I ran around the backside of the bus driver took off, and then we both returned to the front to see what had happened, and he hadn't gotten off the bus. The door was still open. We shut the bus door that time and shut it. It was at that point that he started walking to the front of the bus, and he had the head in his hand, and he just looked at us like this and dropped it on the ground, like totally calm. It was at that point I think that the police showed up and kicked us off, got us to the end of the bus there.
How were people reacting?
Some people were puking, some people were crying, other people were in shock.
Did you get a look at him?
The killer?
Yeah.
He's either Chinese or native. That's all I can say. 6 feet, 200 pounds, he's wearing sunglasses, bald head. He looked totally calm. He didn't say a word, I don't think, to anybody on the bus. I think he got out and had a cigarette with one girl. Nothing, just totally calm. The guy that he stabbed was listening to his headphones and sleeping.
A truck driver by the name Chris would happen to see 30 plus people and would stop to try and help the once passengers. Chris, the bus driver, and another passenger would go to close the door to impede Lee's escape. Lee remained on the bus and continued disemboweling the now dead McLean. It wouldn't be until 3 hours later would law enforcement arrive. They would try to reason with Lee to get off the bus, but it was all for nothing. Lee said he'd stay on that bus forever if he had to, and continued to hack at McLean's corpse for hours. At 1:30 a.m., Lee would break through one of the windows of the bus and try to escape, quickly getting arrested. The public was outraged with how the law enforcement handled the situation. They didn't understand why the police didn't just shoot the man and end the madness. He was obviously dangerous. But a curse may be a blessing, because had they done that, no answers would have been brought closure to anyone involved. It would come out that in the events leading up to the horrifying event, Lee's life was on a form of a downward spiral. He had just recently been fired from his job and was recently baptized. All the while it was reported that the night before the killing, Lee spent the night outside just staring at the sky. He claimed he could hear the voice of God. During the trial, Lee pleaded diminished responsibility due to not being of sound mind. Psychiatric analysis would also say that Lee had undiagnosed schizophrenia, which is quite evident with the way he acted. What caused an outroar with the public was the fact that everyone on that bus and McLean's family had no say in the judgment. They weren't even allowed to voice their own opinions. Vince now goes by a different name. I won't be sharing it here because I don't advocate for hatred being spread on this platform. After getting the help he needed in 2017, he would be released as a free man.
Well, if you feel that way and other Canadians feel that way, then you can multiply that by about 1 million and you might get close to what I feel like. I'm so frustrated with trying to raise awareness to the issue. That people are so unaware of how these cases are handled. They truly believe that these people go into a place where they're never coming out again. They're never going to rejoin our society. I will tell you right now, the system is hell-bent and focused on rehabilitating and reintegrating that individual back into our society. What you need to understand is this man suffers from paranoid schizophrenia. It is incurable and it is a lifelong illness. It is medication dependent. In Canada, we have no legal mechanism that would require him to continue treatment after release with no criminal record. He'll have the freedom to cross borders. And when he does cross borders, any border, provincial or into the States, wherever he wants to go, when he does cross a border, his mental health diagnosis will not follow him.
So literally, he's gotten away with this.
Well, yeah.
So how have you handled your grieving process during the time?
I'll let you know when I start it. I haven't had opportunity really to do that. Timothy died in 2008, and since that time, we've attended the trial and 6 review board hearings already. And I'd like to clarify what a review board is. A review board is simply a board that sits to review the offender's mental status. That is it. The crime itself is not discussed. We're not allowed to talk about the index offense, which is how they refer to the slaughter of my child.
Index offense?
Index offense, so as not to offend the offender in his treatment. I have an opportunity to submit an impact statement, a victim's impact statement, and they have the opportunity, they being the defense attorneys and the Crown, whoever, has the opportunity then to censor it so that we don't upset the treatment of the afflicted individual.
This story is horrifying to hear. A man peacefully sleeping as he's brutally killed and his corpse humiliated by a man out of his mind. Emotionally, you would want nothing good to happen to the monster that so viciously took away another's life. But I will say, let's take a step back from Vince Lee and hope for those who witnessed the savagery of psychosis to be able to move on from this event, to sleep peacefully at night and never remember the brutal scene of pure insanity. With a look like this, you can only hope. Hey guys, I just wanted to get in the camera and be totally transparent with you all. My life is changing. As you can see, another chapter of my life has been completed. I'm graduating, you guys. Woo, graduation, yay. It's a bittersweet time. If I'm being honest, there was not a day that went by that I would joke around with my friends and be like, oh, I can't wait to be out of this hellhole. Oh, I can't wait to be free. And of course, when the finish line is right in front of me, why am I hesitating? I just wanted you guys to know where my mental space is at, and I wanted you guys to know just how my life is changing. And change can sometimes be painful, or change could possibly be the golden era, the Renaissance. And so, like I said, I wanted to just let you guys know that I had a system going where I would post 2 videos every month. I would try to get 2 videos off, 2 videos off, 2 videos off every 2 weeks. And it seemed to be working. But I was in a controlled, stagnant situation. I was in my own dorm. I had my own spot. I didn't need to have permission to record these videos with absolute silence. But here and now, I'm graduating. I will be moving out, and I will be out in the real world, couch surfing for a little bit until I find a stable place for myself. And I wanted to just let you guys know that that may affect my videos. I may not be able to go ahead and, my bad. I might not be able to post videos as regularly as possible. I might not be available to put myself on Facecam. I may not be available to do a lot of things. And I just wanted to show you guys the true me. It's me. I'm graduating. And I just wanted you guys to know that I don't take it for granted. I took this very seriously. I'm taking this very seriously because I do think I can nurture this into something that could change my life for the better. But like a lot of things, in due time. So with that, I don't even know if this is going to make it into the video at the beginning or at the end. But if you're watching this at the end, then thank you for watching this whole thing. And if we're watching this at the beginning, you're in for a treat. Deuces.